Om Ajnanatimmirandhasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we find here Lord Kapila explaining about how the different material manifestations, they come about in sequence, one after another. Prabhupada gives an example. He says, similar to what is described here, we find the same kind of manifestation happens in the womb of mother, wherein sequentially, one by one, the whole body of the child is formed. This is in contrast to what we do materially with our so-called technology. Just like if we need to form some kind of machine, we make different parts separately, then assemble them together. But how the creation takes place in the Lord's creation is, everything is sequentially manufactured, created one after another. Mind, senses, intelligence, all these things, sense objects. So, here a very interesting understanding and analysis is being done, so that when we understand the senses, the mind with which are like the instruments with which we are acting, they belong, they're manufactured, they're created by someone, they're controlled by someone, and it is only given to us for some time. So with this understanding, we can come to know who is the real proprietor of these senses, the mind, all these different instruments with which the living entity acts in this material world. So this we will see Prabhupada describing very nicely. Another important thing which Prabhupada explains is how the yoga system is very scientific. Because the dhyana yoga which is described in Bhagavad Gita or in the Vedic scriptures, it is very scientific, wherein the yogi is advised to gradually pull his senses from sense objects and place it and meditate on Lord Aniruddha. Because Lord Aniruddha is the controller, creator of this mind. In fact, in Bhagavatam, in 12th Canto, Suta Goswami very nicely explains this, that yogi is actually meditating on Lord Aniruddha. This today we find so-called yogis, they have manufactured meditating on some void, some kind of some point or some void, isn't it? But that is never found, we don't find in the Vedic scriptures. That is all some inventions. Otherwise, in Bhagavatam itself, Suta Goswami, he explains on what actually the yogis meditate upon. It's a very interesting verse, very famous verse. So he says, Yam Brahma Varuna Rudra Marutah Stuvanti Divyahi Stave. He says, Brahma, the head of all the demigods, Varuna, Indra, Rudra, Maruta, all these different devatas, Stunvanti, they're always glorifying, they're always praising, Divyahistaver, with transcendental prayers. Just like the Supreme Lord is called Uttama Shloka. The Supreme Lord is glorified with not something inferior. Udgata Tama means that which is transcendental. Divyaihi, transcendental. So, all these great demigods like Brahma, Varuna, Indra, Rudra, Maruta, they're always praising that Supreme Lord with transcendental prayers. Also, how else they're praising the Supreme Lord? By reciting the Vedas. Vedaha, Sangha, along with all their branches of the Vedas, corollary branches of the Vedas. Upavedas are there, Samhitas are there. All these are corollary branches of the Vedas. Padakramaha, in the Vedic literatures, the mantras are very sequentially, beautifully arranged. Padakramaha it is called. The mantras arranged sequentially is called Padakramaha. Upanishadaihi, and through the Upanishads. Then Gayantiyam Samagaha, and the singers of Samaveda, they also glorify that Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are specific singers because Vedas have to be chanted in a certain ways. So, Samagaha means those who have perfected themselves in chanting Samaveda. So, specifically, Samaveda is filled with hymns which are sung. So, that is why that specific word is used, Samagaha. So, that Supreme Lord, who is glorified by Brahma, Varuna, Indra, with transcendental prayers, by reciting Veda along with corollaries of Vedas, along with mantras which are arranged sequentially in the Vedas, Upanishad, and by Samagahas, this Supreme Lord is meditated upon by yogis. Dhyana avasthitaha, being situated in dhyana, in meditation, tadgatena manasa, and when they are so meditating in their mind, they are able to see the form of the Lord. Pashyanti yamayoginaha. In their trance, in their meditation, in their mind, tadgatena manasa, they are able to see this form of the Lord, which is Aniruddha. Yasya antam na viduhu. The end of the Supreme Lord, the beginning of the Supreme Lord, it cannot be found by Sura, Asura Ganaha, whether demigods or demons or asuras. No one can find the beginning and the end of the Lord. Devai tasmai namaha. I simply pray to Him. I simply glorify Him. So, this is what the Vedic literatures actually talk about. That the meditation is not on some void, it is on one of the form of the Lord called Aniruddha. So, we all understand the Lord, He holds the four transcendental objects: Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma. Suppose, let us say the four hands. We begin with Shankha, in another Chakra, Gada, Padma. That is one form. Then when you rotate it, instead of Shankha, let us say it begins with Gada. So then Gada, Padma, Shankha, Chakra, like this. So there are 24 different forms based on the position of these four different transcendental objects the Lord is holding. So one of them is called as Aniruddha. And this form of Aniruddha is the one which is the creator of this mind, the controller of the mind, and controller of the senses. We've all heard in Bhagavad Gita many times Arjuna calling Krishna as Rishikesha. He is calling the Supreme Lord by the name Rishikesha. Rishikesha means the master of the senses. Rishika, Isha. Rishika means the senses and Isha means the master. So the Supreme Lord in the form of Aniruddha is Rishikesha also. He is also called by the name Rishikesha. So if you see here it is said, Yat vidurhi aniruddhakyam rishikanam adhishwaram. He is called Aniruddha. And who is this Aniruddha? Rishikanam, of our senses, Adhishwaram. He is the original controller, proprietor of our senses. You see. So very nicely, very systematically, it is described which form of the Lord is actually controlling our mind and senses. And that is why in the previous one of the verses when we were reading, Prabhupada was saying that if the devotees meditate on this form of Aniruddha, then that is the prescribed method, that our mind will not be agitated, it will be completely peaceful. This is the form of the Lord. So, in Bhagavad Gita, we find very important information regarding the mind. Prabhupada explains that this material body is a dull matter. Gross senses are there. So Krishna describes one by one that higher than the senses is the mind. Indriyani prani ahur indriyebhyah param manaha. Indriya, they are superior than dull matter, and superior to the senses is the mind. And mind is also considered as the central sense, and all the other senses are actually working under the direction of mind. Intelligence is higher in the sense it discriminates whatever proposal is given by the mind. But otherwise, mind is central. That has to be understood. Mind is the one under whose control the senses are working. Intelligence can only discriminate and give direction to the mind. But it is up to the mind. If the mind is swayed by the senses, then actually even the intelligence can be dragged. See, if the mind is swayed by the senses, if the senses are very strong, they can sway away even the mind. That is why central point of yoga is to control the mind. That is why mind is considered to be very important in the practice of yoga. Even in devotional service, that is why first work is given to the mind. Savai manaha Krishna padarvindayor. Then comes vacham sivai kuntha gunanuvarnane. Everything else will follow. If the mind can be placed on Krishna, then automatically all other senses gradually will come under control. Because mind is like the manager of all the senses. It is central. And if we understand this point, that mind, the controlling deity of the mind is Lord Aniruddha. The controlling deity of all our senses is Rishikesha or Aniruddha. Then it becomes very simple. So there is a definition of devotional service is given. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. It is the definition of bhakti. When all our senses, including the mind, when they are engaged in the service of proper the senses, that is actually called as devotional service. That is called as bhakti. So, there is a difference between how the mind is controlled by the yogis and how the mind and the senses are controlled by devotees. The method of controlling the mind by surrendering to the controller of mind, by surrendering to the proprietor of the senses, is far superior, because he is the controller of the senses. And if we surrender to him, he controls the senses. Arjuna is praying to the Lord, my dear Lord, you give me direction. That is why he is calling him as Rishikesha. You give me direction. Because our mind, our senses, they are frail. They will fail us. If we listen to our intelligence, it will fail us. But if we surrender to the Lord and the direction is given by the Lord in our heart, and it is confirmed by the spiritual master, then actually that is a superior process of controlling the mind and the senses. See how much difference is there? Yogis, they don't understand, they don't recognize this fact that Lord Aniruddha, Rishikesha, he is the controller of my senses and my mind. So the better process is to surrender unto him, to meditate on him. They try in their own way, by their own strength, trying to withdraw the senses. Whereas bhakti process is completely different. Right from the beginning, the senses are engaged in the service of the master of senses, and the mind is placed at the lotus feet of Aniruddha. And that way it becomes easy. Because if the Lord takes control of our senses, then whatever we are doing, it is actually done by the Lord. Now we have given the power of attorney to our own mind. We have given the power of attorney to our own senses. This power of attorney we have to hand over to Rishikesha, Aniruddha. How that is done? Simple. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. Just utilize the senses. Prabhupada gives a very wonderful example. He says, what is all these things? These are all mind, senses, they are all different instruments. What is this body? This body is a machine working with all these instruments. Yantra Rudhani Mayaya, correct? Very clear explanation is given in Bhagavad Gita. This body is nothing but a machine, and it is working through mind, senses, intelligence. All these are different instruments given to this body. So, suppose you borrow some instrument from somebody. You can utilize it as per the direction given by that proprietor. Correct? Let us say you borrow some machine from somebody. Like we are digging our, with JCB machine, we are digging foundation for Balaji temple. So now the machine has to be utilized as per the direction given by the proprietor. Suppose he has said, you use it for digging foundation of Balaji temple. And slowly we tell him, no, you leave this work, you do our other work. It is illegal, it is not proper. He has given the direction, you do for this work. Correct? Just a simple example to make us understand. Similarly, if a devotee understands very clearly, these instruments belong to Rishikesha, this mind belongs to Aniruddha, then I should utilize them as per their direction, for their purpose. That is called bhakti. And the moment we utilize them for our sense gratification, that is material sense gratification. So, this concept is very clearly explained. Another very interesting concept which Prabhupada explains, he says, one should understand there are innumerable forms of the Lord, and the Adi Purusha is Krishna, and he is non-different from all of them. Now from tomorrow we should not think Now I have to worship this form of the Lord Aniruddha. Govindamadi Purusham Advaitam Achyutam Anadi Rupam. Correct. Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. It's a very interesting concept Prabhupada explains. That the Supreme Lord, all these innumerable forms are there. Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Vasudeva, Sankarshana. Like that, innumerable forms of the Lord are there. And the fountainhead of all these forms. And all of them are Advaitam, non-different. And all of them are emanating from the Supreme Lord. All these forms are expansions of the Supreme Lord. And all of them are infallible. You see. Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadim, Anantarupam, no beginning. Anantarupam, the Supreme Lord has innumerable such forms. And all of them are emanating from Govinda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, in that sense, the devotee is already worshipping Aniruddha the moment he is utilizing his senses in practicing devotional service for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. That is called as devotional service. So, a devotee does not have to worship the different forms of the Lord separately like that. If one is simply worshipping the Supreme Lord Krishna, all the other forms are included in him. And Prabhupada gives that example very nicely. Prabhupada says, when Krishna came personally and the Lord advented himself in Mathura and later in Vrindavan, Bhagavatam describes all the forms of the Lord. Varaha, Pradyumna, Narsimha, all of them, all the different expansions of the Lord, all the different incarnations of the Lord, everybody descended along with the Supreme Lord. It is just like when the king comes, then whether it is the ministers and all the different attendants, everybody comes together. So when the Supreme Lord descends, he descends with his expansions, he descends with his incarnation, and even up to the point, in order to serve the Supreme Lord, all the different devatas were also ordered that you, along with their wife, you can also appear in the different families of Yadu. And all of them appear to fulfill the mission of the Lord. And that is how we find when the Lord was winding off his different leelas, so the Lord came along with all his paraphernalia and everything. How beautiful it is explained. And the Lord, along with him, even his universal form is there. This material form is universal form. And when the Lord left, seemingly one body, that is that universal form, Prakarta Deha. You see. And when the Lord left, along with all his paraphernalia and everything, we find similarly the Lord planned gradually all the Pandavas, one by one, they retired from their family life. Understanding, now the Lord has already wounded off his different leelas, and now similarly we have to wind off. And Prabhupada explains that very beautifully, very nicely. He says, when the Supreme Lord's mission was going on, the Lord empowered Arjuna with his different energies. And when Arjuna was so empowered, even devatas were astonished, because devatas are far superior to anybody on earth. But by the mercy of the Lord, in order to fulfill the mission of the Lord, Arjuna was empowered. And when the Lord wound off his leela, Arjuna was disempowered. So much so that Arjuna is saying, I am the same Arjuna, I am having the same Gandiva, I am having the same chariot, same horses, but all my different energies are withdrawn. Everything is gone. And he says the example is given just like a magical wand. Everything is vanquished, finished. And he was defeated. He was trying to protect the queens of the Lord in Dwarka, and he was defeated by just infidel cowherd men. He was defeated there. So there Arjuna understands that yes, when it was required, the Lord endowed me with all his power, and when his mission is over now, he has wound off. Because the Lord wanted, now you also come back. When Shakti was required, I gave you. Now it is not required, now you can come back. So understanding this, immediately Maharaj Yudhishthira renounced. All other brothers also followed. Draupadi followed. Kunti Maharani followed. All of them went back to God. There is a chapter called Pandavas Retire Timely. So timely, they gave up everything. They understood Leela of the Lord is over. We should also go back. Similarly, it is given that the Supreme Lord wound off the Yadavas in this way. This reasoning people do not understand. Why there was a fight among the Yadavas? Anyone knows? Yes, Yadavas by the mercy of the Lord were so powerful. No possibility anyone else could defeat them. There was no possibility. Only among themselves it was possible. So the Lord created like that. It's just like the bamboo. They, with each other they collide, and then there is a fire, forest fire, and everything is finished. That is how the Lord planned this way. And even understanding this, Vidura, one of the great devotees of the Lord, he also understood the Supreme Lord has wound off his Leela. He also left his kingdom, everything. He went to Prabhas Kshetra, and there he met Maitreya Rishi, understood, heard from him about the Supreme Lord, and gradually he also attained, including he gave counsel to Dhritarashtra, and by his mercy even Dhritarashtra was able to get rid of this material entanglement. So the Supreme Lord, he comes with all his paraphernalia, and when he goes back, he winds everything and goes back. So the whole idea is, Prabhupada explains from that concept is, that if we are worshipping the Supreme Lord Krishna, then everybody is included. All the expansions of the Lord, all the avatars of the Lord, everyone is included in that. So in that sense, the devotees of the Lord are superior to everyone. So simply by performing devotional service, automatically, by the mercy of the Lord, our desires, our senses, our mind can come under control. No other method. It's only by spiritual strength mind can be controlled. And that spiritual strength is given by the mercy of the Lord. Otherwise, there is no other method. Once, Prabhupada was praying in one of the temple very fervently. And when the disciple asked Prabhupada, what were you praying? So Prabhupada said, I was praying to the Lord that kindly always keep me in your service so that I may not fall down. So pure devotee of the Lord, he is teaching that actually until and unless we very, very fervently pray to the Lord, This Maya is very dangerous. Any moment one can fall down. So how important it is to be always praying to the Lord. Never a devotee thinks that I have become so advanced in Krishna consciousness, now I have become fixed. No. Maya is so strong, from any position we may have achieved, we can fall down. So, devotee always remains very humble and always prays to the Lord for protecting his devotional service. That is very important. So, we'll stop with this. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki